Hello, hello, everyone. Hello, hola from Guadalajara, Mexico, Guadalajara, Mexico. It has been so long since I did a live stream. I want to know if you were at the last live stream. It was way back in, I think, June 2024. So it's been a minute. I am glad to be back here with you. I would love to know who you are, who's tuning in today, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I have Taylor upstairs in his office. He will be monitoring the comments today. Thank you so much, Taylor, my husband, for doing that. If you are new around here, if this is your first live stream, I'm Alex, and I have been living in Mexico since 2017. So this month, in October, I'm going to be celebrating 8 years in Mexico. So 8 years in Mexico, 3 years in Guadalajara. Before that, I was living in a city called Queretaro for 5 years, and that's where I was living when I started my YouTube channel. So I'm looking at the comments. I've got some people checking in saying hello. After you let me know where you're calling in from, where you're calling in from, because it's a talk show. After you let me know where you are watching from, where you're tuning in from. See, it's been a minute since my last live stream. Make sure to give this live stream a thumbs up. I would really, really appreciate that. Hello, Michael. Michael, one of our longest members, I think our longest member of the Move to Mexico membership. So glad to have you here, Michael, tuning in, and also glad to call you a friend. We have Naz, or I think earlier in the chat, she said her name was Nancy, tuning in from Pennsylvania. Taylor, like I said, monitoring the comments. We have Brenda from Wisconsin, wishing that she was here in Guadalajara. It is, the sun, I'm just looking out my kitchen window now. The sun is peeking out, but it was raining earlier. We're kind of at the tail end of rainy season here in Guadalajara. I've got Miguel. Hey, Miguel. Also tuning in from Guadalajara. Yay. So you probably, I wonder if it rained on you earlier today too. Jeff, hey, how's it going? Watching from Winston-Salem. Awesome, awesome. Exactly. First time listener, long time caller. You got it. Sammy D from Knoxville, Tennessee. Oh, hopefully going to be watching from Querétaro by the end of the year. That's so exciting. I absolutely love Querétaro. I think it is a wonderful, wonderful city, and I'm so happy for you, Sammy. Please drop whatever questions that you have about Querétaro in the chat. And we have Ivan. Hello, or Ivan. Because it says Aleman at the end, so I'm going to go with Ivan. Awesome. Calling in from Querétaro. Or why do I keep saying calling in? Is this going to be like the whole live stream where I'm like calling in from different places? Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for supporting my channel. If you would like to support further, you can do like a superstar, super chat sticker, I think that they're called. But there's a way for you to give a little bit if you are so inclined. Also, I want to make sure that I mention my Patreon, and we have the Move to Mexico membership tier over there, and lots of awesome stuff happening over on my Patreon. I put up content. I think I've been putting it up for like three new pieces of content a week. Every Friday, I do a little feature called Freebie Friday, where I answer questions from the community, and that is for any free member. So there is also free content over there. You just have to sign up and be a member. So it's not necessarily public, but it is free. So there's a free tier. There's also our Salsa Seeker tier at $5 and our Move to Mexico membership tier at $15, which we have a live call on this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Guadalajara time. And I love our monthly Mexico mixers. I'll be sure to talk about those a little bit later on. But if you like this live stream, but you're like, wait, I wish I could actually call in. I wish I could call in and talk to Alex. That's what the monthly live streams are all about. So we've got one on Wednesday. It would be really awesome to see you there. I saw a new feature on StreamYard, or I'm about to try it, so like bear with me, but you can there it is. You can scan that little QR code, and that is my Patreon if you would like to check it out. Like I said, something for everybody over there. And I also want to make sure I shout out our Mexico insiders. That is Anna, Ryan, and Jill, plus Andres is our newest Mexico insider. So thank you so much for your support. Oh, better take a sip of water. Thank you, Michael, for the taco money. Yes. So appreciated. So appreciated. We have got a question here from Sammy. Sammy, who mentioned earlier that she'll hopefully be in Queretaro by the end of the year, asks, did you have a car at any time when living in Queretaro? And no, we did not. Taylor and I did not buy a car until we moved to Guadalajara. So we lived in Queretaro for 5 years without a car. We did rent one on a couple of different occasions, especially for some road trips into the Sierra Queretana, which you're gonna find out all about, Sammy, the beautiful mountain range there. I would definitely say that depending on where you're living in Queretaro, it could be nice to have a car for sure. You can definitely get around without one. I mean, like I said, we did it for 5 years, but we were living in the Centro Histórico, which is kind of, I would definitely say is the most walkable area of the city. If you are kind of like getting outside of the Centro Histórico, outside of Jardines, outside of the area around the aqueduct, it starts to get a little less walkable. So that might be, especially if you have pets, it looks like in your picture you have children, then you might want a vehicle. So I would definitely say that Querétaro is a little more of a driving city. So yeah, something to think about. All right. Yep. Oh, Sammy, going to be there with your wife, 2 little boys. Awesome. Andres, hello, calling from El Paso. Why? Okay, that's it. I'm sorry. We're gonna have to move on from calling. That's just gonna be what it is. Andres, I hope you were here. In case you weren't, I shouted you out as one of the Mexico insiders. Thank you so much for your support on Patreon. Couldn't do what I do without the support. Crystal just moved to Querétaro 2 weeks ago. Congratulations. Yay! Just joined the Salsa Seeker tier. Thank you so much for your support. All right, got a question here from Clifford wanting to know, and please, this is the Ask Me Anything. This is the Q&A. Go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. So I'm looking through them now, and I'm going to try to get to as many as I can. But if yours kind of gets lost in the shuffle, a great way to kind of get it boosted to the top is one of those super chat stickers. Plus, it helps me out so I can do more of these live streams. Clifford wants to ask, how hard is it to get a bank account now without an RFC or CURP? It seems like it's impossible after the intercom issue over the summer. Yes, Clifford, I would say that it is pretty difficult now to get a bank account without an RFC or a CURP. Yes, I would say that this is a shift that has been happening in Mexico over a few years now. I mean, going all the way back to when we moved here in 2017, I remember, going into Santander. Actually, I think the first bank we went into was BBVA, and they were like, you don't have a CURP or an RFC, you're a tourist. No, we don't do that in Mexico. So it's been a long time that a lot of the biggest financial institutions, the biggest banks have been saying, no bank accounts for people without residency in Mexico, which it goes residency, and with residency, you get your CURP number, which for anyone who's like, what is up with all of these acronyms? Your CURP number is essentially like your Mexican like social security number, the equivalent of a US social security number. And then your RFC is your Mexican tax ID number. And that is required now to open a bank account. And I would say even those banks that were letting people slide, it's been the past few years, the past 3-4 years, where intermittently like a bank will go through and lock people out that don't have an RFC on file. So I would say, yeah, it's something that they want you to have. And I think even if you can find like a credit union or someplace that won't require it, I think that it's only a matter of time until they do. Let's see. Did you bring a car? Oh, I think this question was for Crystal in the chat, but I wanted to say, I saw about the bringing a car from the US or buying one in Mexico. Sammy, I have a video on my YouTube channel all about our experience buying a car in Guadalajara and what we wish that we would have known. It was kind of like a saga. And also over on my Patreon, one of the Freebie Friday questions that I answered. So this is for free members of the Patreon can get access to this content, was specifically about bringing a US plated car into Mexico. That was one of the subscriber questions. So might be something to check out. All right, let's see. All right, had this question from Nancy, looking for recommendations for family-friendly Mexican, not party neighborhoods near the train lines, since I prefer to walk and use public transportation and want to limit Uber use. So the train lines in Guadalajara, my experience with the train lines, I have used the L3, the line 3 of the light rail. So it connects, it's really cool. It connects Guadalajara Centro, Tlaquepaque Centro, and Zapopan Centro. So I really like Zapopan Centro. I think that or over there and the neighborhoods like around there would definitely be worth checking out, as well as Tlaquepaque Centro is really nice. You kind of get that Pueblo type feel, and Zapopan and Tlaquepaque are both part of the Zona Metropolitana de Guadalajara. So they're both part of the ZMG, Guadalajara, the sprawl, like so many Mexican cities. They still have their kind of own unique vibe, their own thing going on, but they are, they're all squished together. Let's see. Also, I did see your questions before the chat before the live started about your service dogs. I would say that Mexico is a very, very, very dog-friendly place, especially and I said Mexico, but I mean Guadalajara specifically. I see dogs all the time, cafes, restaurants, going into stores, especially I'm guessing if it's a service dog, then it's well behaved. You don't need any special documentation for Mexico for a service dog. Now, this is for having it out and about in the city. Obviously, airlines are going to be a different story. But for having a service dog in the city, no special documentation required. I think, if it had like a little vest or something that said Perro Guía or Perro de Servicio, that would be very helpful. And then just whatever documentation you use, in your home city and your home country, I think that having that, would suffice, but no additional documentation needed. All righty. Yes, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I also wanted to mention the free Move to Mexico Quick Start Guide. This is a 32-page guide that I have all with my apartment hunting tips, my renting in Spanish, cheat sheets. There's a Move to Mexico checklist in there. You can go to backpackingbrunette.com/Mexico guide to get that. And right now I think it's the 2024. I don't know. It's been a minute since I've updated the guide. All the not that the information in it is not good, but once you are on the list for this guide, then you will get any updates to the guide, which I'm planning on releasing an updated version of the guide at the start of 2026. Can you believe we're just a few months out from 2026? So yes, wanted to just shout that out. I believe it's also in the description of the live stream that there's a link down there. Please keep sending your questions in. I'm just going to get a sip of water quickly. Had a couple other questions here. Something that I often get asked is, what's the number one mistake people make when planning their move to Mexico? And it's so hard to narrow down just one number one mistake. But let's see. Okay, a couple things come to mind, so bear with me. I have a YouTube video on my channel that came out 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago now, talking about choosing your consulate, how to choose your consulate. This is for the visa interview, the visa process that you do in your home country. And the video just gives you tips for finding, a consulate and just kind of letting you in on the big, I guess, secret, I don't know, that is, you might need to travel to find a consulate where you meet the requirements, where there's appointments available, and that is communicative, is answering your questions. So I would say the number one mistake many people make when planning their move to Mexico is just kind of like sticking to the consulate nearest them. And really they could have, saved time, saved a lot of headaches, a lot of heartaches in some cases, by just being willing to travel to a different consulate. There's a clip at the start of that video from one of our Move to Mexico membership members, one of our community peeps, talking about her experience, trying to go to the Salt Lake City consulate and them just wanting, so much documentation, and it was just becoming a headache. And then she ended up flying to Phoenix and going to her visa interview at that consulate, and it was just so smooth. And now she's living in Puerto Vallarta. So that is actually one of the membership benefits. One of the Patreon benefits is I've got a bunch of foreigner interviews on there. I have an interview with my friend Anne, who has lived in, I think, like 11 different cities in Mexico. She has some great insight. She moved to Mexico around the same time that I did and has just, been on a different journey here. And it was really interesting hearing about all the places that she's called home and what she's learned along the way. So definitely check out the foreigner interviews over on Patreon. There's some really good stuff over there. Got a question here, financial solvency. Is it more accepted to use retirement savings or monthly income? I have plenty in retirement, but not enough just in a savings account. Do you recommend bringing both? I recommend bringing, what you have. I remember when I went to my interview at the Detroit consulate, mind you, this was back in 2020, but when I went for my visa interview, I was showing them some different accounts, and then they actually just were like, okay, that looks good, but can you just show us like what you have in your checking account? And they wanted me to like open my bank account like right on my phone, I guess like to make sure there was money in there too. I don't know. It was like kind of weird, but appeased them. So I really think the more documentation that you have, the better. I would also say for your retirement savings, if you work with like a financial planner, or if there's like a contact person like with your retirement savings accounts, it would be good to have like a letter from them, just something simple saying that like you have access to the money, because sometimes some consulates can be kind of weird about retirement savings, because they're like, wait, you're not going to actually have access to that, even though you would have access to that, but even, you'd be able to take stuff out and just whatever, deal with the penalties. So just making sure that they understand that you have access to that money. So maybe like a letter from a financial advisor. And I would also, yes, bring the information about your monthly income. Yeah, Sammy makes the point that the consulates in bigger cities are getting slammed right now. This is actually something that Yvonne Pavan from Host Relocation and I talked about. She was just saying that, oh, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. She was just, encouraging people to be even more flexible about the consulates that they're going to, because consulates are, their priority, of course, is like Mexican nationals, living outside of Mexico. So they will be opening more appointment slots to accommodate those people. And maybe some consulates are even, Yvonne told me, closing down their visa appointment slots or really cutting back on those. So definitely something to keep in mind. Can you get a whole house water softener system and filtration in Queretaro? Yes, you can do that. There's a reverse osmosis water filtration or something like that, I think it's called, that is really popular in Mexico, and everywhere that I've ever used it, it works really, really well. And if you wanted to spring for that, of course it is going to be like a cost, but it would be a major, major luxury. That would be like, that's house goals for sure. Let's see. Oh, shout out here to the Milwaukee consulate. Used a facilitator and they got me an appointment within 3 weeks. That is great. That is really good to know. Let's see. I am definitely trying to keep an eye on the questions over here. Alrighty, let's see what else we've got. What was the biggest culture shock you experienced when you first moved to Mexico? Now, it has been a minute since I moved to Mexico. Like I said at the top of the live stream, I moved here back in 2017. So it's been just about 8 years. And it's like a big trip down memory lane to think all the way back there. And also something that I've talked a little bit about on my channel is that before I lived in Mexico, we lived in Madrid. We lived in Spain for 2 years. So I think my brain was a little more acclimated to cultural shocks, because I think the first country that you live in outside of your home country, that's where like the real shockage happens. But in Mexico, there were still some moments. I would say the biggest culture shock for me was just how much this is like a cash-based economy. In the US, I never ever, like, I don't remember the last time I touched like a dollar in the US, like a physical like bill. I just use cards for everything, or just your phone, like just tap. And here in Mexico, I mean, definitely back in 2017, it was a lot more so. And I think it's credit cards and are accepted a lot more now even than they were back in 2017. But I think paying our rent every single month in cash was a major, major culture shock, and still something like I'm not quite used to. When you see that wad of bills waiting for your landlord. Let's see. Have you rented unfurnished? Where did / can you get furniture items? I would say, okay, have you rented okay. I have rented unfurnished. This apartment here in Guadalajara was unfurnished. We did move our stuff from Queretaro here, and our apartment in Queretaro was also unfurnished. You will have to go back in the archives on my channel, but I actually have a video all about furnishing an apartment in Mexico and what our experience was like doing that. I'm really, really happy that we did that because at least when we moved to Querétaro back in 2017, the furnished rentals left quite a lot to be desired. I went into our apartment hunt there hoping, that was my plan, to find a furnished apartment, and it was just like, ugh, it was not it. So I was really glad when Taylor and I found it was kind of like a dream, little apartment, casita house there in Querétaro Centro. We loved the location. We loved the house itself. It really felt like it was an old Mexican house. It had been a casona that was divided into 2 apartments. And it was exactly what we had envisioned, minus the fact that there was no furniture in it. So I really thought it was quite easy to, find furniture. There's a lot of people in Mexico make furniture. So, for example, this couch behind me, we had made here in Guadalajara. In Querétaro, I also had a couch made there that's upstairs now. So lots of affordable opportunities to find furniture. And I think it just helps make a space more your own. And I really think that furnishing our place in Querétaro made us feel much more at home there. And I don't know, I kind of think when I look back and when we fell in love with Mexico and when we really, felt at home, I've got to think that our apartment and the furnishing, the furniture, our own furnishings really helped with that to make it feel more cozy. So I'd say go for it. How I miss all these videos on your channel. There is a backlog. I don't even know how many I don't think I've quite made it to 200 videos on my channel, but I've been doing this since 2020. So there's a backlog out there on the channel. Scroll back. All righty. I also, going back to this question, what's the number one mistake people make when planning their move to Mexico? I know I said the consulates was the number one mistake, but that's kind of that's a little practical thing. And I think a little more kind of zooming out a bit, I would say that the number one mistake that people make when planning their move to Mexico is they just zero in on one city. I think that there are a handful of cities that get talked about on YouTube, and people just hear about these few cities, and then they go to one of those and they're like, oh, I heard about this from that person. And I understand that because you're making a huge move and you want someone else's experience to go off of. I totally get that. I would say though, to zoom out a little bit, if you have an opportunity to take a few trips to Mexico, to travel around a little bit, that's something that I really, really love about a couple of the foreigner interviews that we have over on Patreon. Anne and also Deborah traveled a ton. Anne has traveled so much in Mexico, and Deborah, when she moved here, visited, I think, 20 cities before she ultimately landed in the city that she called home. And I understand that not everybody can do that, but if you can travel and if you can see some different places and get a feeling, it's a good thing. That is not what I did when we moved to Mexico back in 2017. Taylor and I moved to Querétaro sight unseen. We're like, it sounds good. and there was barely any information online about it at the time. I remember my dad bought me like a moon travel book, travel guide about Querétaro, but it was really, the Querétaro section was like one sliver, and most of the book was about San Miguel de Allende and Guanajuato. So we went to Querétaro, sight unseen, and we were really happy there for 5 years. But honestly, looking back, oh, someone in our building is using the blender. Looking back, I wish that we, would have traveled a little bit more. I think that Querétaro is where we were meant to be when we were there. But then, after 5 years of living there, when we came to Guadalajara, I was like, wow, like I was like the heart eyes like emoji. I was like, I need to live here. I just fell in love instantly. And it was a city we never ever considered moving to. It wasn't a city we had even talked about ever visiting. We came here because some friends of ours had moved here from Querétaro and we wanted to go visit them. And it was supposed to be I think it was supposed to be a 10-day trip, and we ended up staying for 3 weeks. Our friends bought a mattress so we could sleep more comfortably at their house. And yeah, I'm just so happy here. So yeah, I would say just, I understand the reasoning behind zooming in on one place, but keep an open mind for sure. All right, we had a question from Ivan wanting to know, what is your opinion about Dia de Muertos? How does it compare to Halloween? I follow you because I'm learning English and your accent is good for learning. Thank you so much. I actually used to be an English teacher. That's what I did when I was living in Madrid. And I also taught English online when we first moved to Mexico. And I really believe that being an English teacher has changed my accent. It has changed the way that I speak. I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Michigan, and here and there you can pick up on the accent. Let me know in the chat if you're like, oh yeah, I knew she was from Michigan, or I knew she was from the Midwest. I think you hear it probably most when I say accent. Accent. But that's that is a funny thing about being an English teacher, how it changes your accent and your vocabulary. But going back to your question, Yvonne, about Dia de Muertos and how it compares to Halloween, I think that one of my favorite traditions in Mexico are the celebrations around Dia de Muertos. I actually have I don't think you can see it no, it's over there. So I'm not going to move or maybe I can move the camera a little bit. I actually have my photos from Dia de Muertos over there year round. It's kind of like a mini altar that I maintain year round. And I think that it is such a beautiful way to honor people who are gone. I love the flores de cempasúchil. I love the papel picado. Those nights when you light your velas, like it is just such a magical celebration and just an opportunity to remember people, because in the US, at least where I'm from, I feel like, we don't really talk about people when they're no longer alive. And I just love this opportunity every single year to tell stories and to remember. Halloween is just something totally different. I think I have seen Halloween celebrations kind of picking up in Mexico. I would say Halloween celebrations in Mexico versus the US. In Mexico, people like go all in on the scary. Like there will just like be like blood and like the shirts are all ripped up. Like everyone is like a version of a zombie, like, or a vampire, really, leaning into the scary, where in the US it's kind of more cutesy and you're an ironic costume. But yeah, I actually think that I've dressed up in Guadalajara a couple times for Halloween and might do it again this year. But thanks for watching my videos, Ivan. I have a video in Spanish that I did this year. That was one of my goals, to do a Spanish vlog. And I think I'd like to do another one before the end of the year. So if you haven't watched that, definitely check it out. All right, Crystal said we visited about 6 or 7 cities, but made our decision on weather, yes, and a colonial tour in Queretaro. So awesome that you visited 6 or 7 cities. That's amazing. That is doing your due diligence for sure. Which colonia do you and Taylor live in Guadalajara? Do you like Chapalita or Providencia more? I may be doing a soft landing in Guadalajara again. I lived there 3 years ago and don't want to go to Colonia Americana. Totally understand. I was actually, last night, Taylor and I were at one of our favorite restaurants in our neighborhood. It's called Soul Chicken. They like Soul, Soul chicken, and they do fried chicken there. Nothing's really on the bone. It's a lot more like sandwiches, tenders, that sort of stuff, but they have a bunch of different sauces. And soul, because they play exclusively hip hop there. And the waiters are so nice. Actually, we had our regulars moment when our waiter just immediately brought the 2 beers that we always get right over to our table when we sat down without even having to ask. So that was really cool. We live in Colonia. Oh my gosh, we live in Arcos Vallarta. I was like, we live in. I need a sip of water, obviously. We live in Arcos Vallarta, which is near the big yellow archways that go. Avenida Vallarta goes under those, and the reason I brought up Soul Chicken was because the waitress last night was just saying how the Colonia Americana like just seems to be getting bigger and bigger, that everything, all the restaurants on the edges or all the neighborhoods on the edges like want to claim that they are from the Americana. But I usually say, on our side of Chapultepec, that's not really the Americana anymore, but we can still, ride our bikes down there, walk down there, that kind of stuff. But there's also a lot to do up here in our colonia, and I wouldn't say I'm going down there all that often. Do I like Chapalita or Providencia more? I've definitely spent more time in Providencia. My friend Julia just moved over there. Her and I did a neighborhood tour last year in Providencia, and she fell in love with it and found an apartment over there that she really liked. And Providencia is lovely, especially the area around Bosque Los Colomos, the park over there. It's incredible, especially right now, just kind of at the end of rainy season. Everything is so green and lush. Chapalita, I think, is another really great area. There's, it has its own little plaza and its own restaurants and its own shopping. I would definitely, actually, Chapalita is the next neighborhood that I would like to do a neighborhood tour about. So if anyone watching from Guadalajara has recommendations for things to do in Chapalita, please let me know. And I wish you luck with your soft landing in Guadalajara. Alrighty, I just wanted to shout out the Patreon again in case anyone is tuning in new. I wanted to say that the Freebie Fridays, again, that I do every single Friday, I answer a question from the community, and that answer is open to the free members. So it's not public, but you do need to be a free member to access that. But I've talked about safety in Guadalajara, how much it costs to live here comfortably, driving in Mexico, bringing a car here, finding a job online. when you join at the Salsa Seeker tier, you'll get access to, oh my gosh, there's so much good stuff. At the $5 tier, it's amazing. Like I said, foreigner interviews. I talked to Maggie about what it's really like to live in Puerto Vallarta. Anne, who shared what she believes is the most overlooked tip for saving money while living in Mexico. She's lived in 11 different cities, currently living in Morelia in Michoacan. Had a 3-part interview with Deborah, who says that she's living her best life in Mexico for less than $1,000 per month. So also the city that she is living in is a city that I think is highly, highly, highly underrated and just doesn't get talked about enough. But you've got to go over to Patreon to check that out. Also, the monthly Mexico mixers. This is for the Move to Mexico membership tier, our Mexico insiders. And every month at the start of the live Zoom call, we do a mini presentation, or I give a mini presentation, and we've done all kinds of topics this year. So we've talked about related to travel, because like I said, I try to mix it up, related to travel, the unspoken rules of tipping in Mexico, how to order street food without looking clueless, related to Spanish language learning, finding the right program for you, breaking down all the different programs out there. Also, we had a presentation about banking in Mexico, setting up your life in Mexico, things that I wish I would have done sooner. And those playbacks are available when you join the Patreon. So just because you weren't there at the live call doesn't mean that you missed out on those. But we've got another live call coming up on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Guadalajara time. You can check out this little QR code here to join us over on Patreon. And when you join the Move to Mexico membership tier, you can vote. You can vote for which mini presentation I'm giving this Wednesday. Do you want it to be Pueblo Mágico deep dives? Which ones live up to the hype? Or cenotes to volcanoes, Mexico's natural wonders bucket list. I always put up a poll so our community can choose which one they want to see. And if Patreon's not your thing, no worries. Like I said, there's a free tier over there as well. And if you wanted to give a little super chat sticker here, that would be very much appreciated. Those super chat stickers. I haven't done a live in a while, so if you want to see another live again, that would be awesome. Yes, B says, I just watched the 3-part series with Deborah today. It was so helpful and fun. She inspired me so much. Deborah is so awesome. At the start of the interview, I think she said something like she had to quit her job to take care of her mom full time. And when she was like getting ready to start for looking for another job, she was like, I just, decided, what did she say, B? It was something like, I wanted, to stop just living to work. And it was really inspiring, that she wanted her life to be about more than just working, and was, trying to find a place where she could do that. Yeah, so Guadalajara is definitely a lot more pleasant than Merida weather-wise. Agreed. People really underestimate the weather in Merida, and it is hot there. Hot, hot, hot. I actually met someone in Puerto Vallarta. No, when I was in Sayulita last November, someone that recognized me from my channel came up, said hi, and said that they were on the west coast of Mexico scouting out a new place to live because they'd been living in Merida for a year and it was just, the weather was too much. All right, let's see some of these other questions over here. If you had to move back tomorrow, move back to the US, to Michigan, to somewhere in the US, what would you miss the most about Mexico? Well, no plans to move back tomorrow, but I love this question for just kind of like what sticks out to me most about Mexico. And I would, of course, miss my friends here. I was reminded every summer, Taylor and I take a trip to Michigan, and we're usually there for a month, 6 weeks or so, seeing friends, seeing family. And when we come back to Mexico, it's always kind of like restarting life here, like not starting from zero, but it's kind of like, trying to get that momentum back. And this year, when we got back from Michigan, I felt like I just like hit the ground running. Like all my friends were like, "Oh, like you're back. Like let's do this. We've got to do that." Like, people making plans with me before I was even back. And that was such an amazing feeling. We kind of just like slipping back into like our old routines, and that felt really great. It was like, wow, Mexico is home. But of course I would miss my friends, but I would also miss, I think, just the general warmth that is in Mexico. I have, been so fortunate to meet, so many incredible people since moving here. And even just like the kindness of strangers has been really, really beautiful. I remember, when we moved to Queretaro, actually the way that we found our apartment, we walked into, after a day of like very frustrating apartment hunting, where I saw some not so nice furnished rentals. We walked into a bar for a drink, started talking with the bartender, and he put us in touch with his friend from high school who ended up being our next door neighbor, and she vouched for us with the landlord and was like, "Yeah, these are my friends." And she had never met us. She was like, "These are my friends and they're looking for a place to live." And we ended up in an apartment that we lived in for 5 years in Mexico, in Querétaro. So, I mean, there's just been so many. That's just one of many, many moments. But yes, the general warmth of people. The other night, I went to Taylor's soccer game. Taylor plays soccer every single Thursday with a really nice group of guys. And when I rarely ever go to games, but I went to on Thursday. And in my defense, his games are very, very late. Like the game on Thursday was at 11 p.m. So I went on Thursday, and all the guys were just like coming up, "Hi, like how are you? It's been so long," like hug, kiss, and I don't know. I just like don't get that in the US. It's like it's a lot more awkward, or sometimes you'll like walk in somewhere and like people won't even say hi to you. I mean, that would never happen in Mexico. Fish stick lunch coming through with the super sticker. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you. Does Morelia have food options like Guadalajara? Guadalajara is a huge city. I think something between like 5 and 6 million people live in the ZMG, the Zona Metropolitana de Guadalajara. So it's big. It is a lot of people. And because there are so many people, there's just more of everything. Morelia is a very small town. I think it's like there's definitely less than 1 million people there. And it's very lovely. I feel like every town in Mexico is like our historical center, our centro histórico with the colonial architecture, but Morelia is really something special. It's very, very beautiful. And going along kind of like with the, less than 1 million people, the small town, like it's more traditional there, I would say. So it's going to be like kind of like your more traditional Mexican food options. Where in Guadalajara, I think that because there's so many people, there's room for innovation, international food. There's so many restaurants. I would say one of the things I love most about living in Guadalajara is the food scene here. Steve, how's it going? Great to see you. Coming from Madrid to Mexico to complete your permanent residency in Querétaro in February. I'm not sure I'll make it to Guadalajara this time. I hope you and Taylor are doing well. Steve, wow, I did a clarity call with Steve a few years back now. And that's so cool that you're going to come to Mexico. And I hope that it all goes smoothly in Querétaro. If you need a facilitator, you know that I always recommend Yvonne Pavan of Host Relocation. She is amazing. And I wish you the best of luck. Yes, of course I remember. Yes, yes, yes. For anyone interested, I do one-to-one clarity calls. These are over Zoom. You send me your questions. We chat during the call, and it's just kind of like that personalized attention and advice because, I mean, YouTube, even this live stream is kind of like it is for a lot of people. And those one-to-one clarity calls, it's specific information tailored to you. And if I don't know the answer to a question, I will do the research to find you an answer. Yes, let's see. Oh, Moni says, agree, folks are generally kinder, and it's not just surface kindness. Yeah, very kind. Yes, the live stream has been so much fun. How are you welcomed in Guadalajara? Guadalajara compared to Mexico City. Do you feel welcome in Guadalajara? I've been living in Guadalajara for 3 years now. I've never, interacted with anyone in person and had any interaction that was other than, polite or kind. I feel welcome in Guadalajara. I would say Guadalajara compared to Querétaro because I have never lived in Mexico City, but I have lived in Querétaro. I lived there for 5 years. And I really think that people in Guadalajara are and I think it's because it's a bigger city maybe, but people are kind of like more open and people just seem to be a little bit more friendly here. And this was nothing that I ever thought when I was living in Querétaro. I was never like, people are mean here or whatever. That was never the case at all. People were very polite, but I think people were a little bit more reserved there than they are in Guadalajara. I feel like people are just kind of like more chatty, more friendly here. That could definitely also be like a me thing, or a my personal situation, because I was living in Querétaro for several years of the pandemic. My Spanish was at a different level living there than it is now. So that could have been part of it too. But I definitely feel welcome in Guadalajara. And I love all the opportunities that there are for kind of like getting plugged into different communities there. I feel like there are different communities here in Guadalajara. There's just so much going on. I think it's easier to find your people here. If you're torn between coming, visiting Guadalajara or Morelia this November, I've taken the bus from Guadalajara to Morelia. It is really, it's not that far. First class bus travel in Mexico. I love it. I would say, even if you weren't able to travel with your dog, you might need to look into traveling on like Primera Plus or ETN with a service dog. But if you were able to do that, you could visit both places potentially. And I think you could get a good feel definitely for Morelia in a couple of weeks. And Guadalajara, you could get at least a feel for it in a couple of weeks as well. Q here from Angela. Is there a number of times traveled to Mexico that the Mexican consulate in the States would be looking for before applying for residency? I just had another call with Yvonne on Friday because we were answering some questions from my last video. And I asked her this specific question because she told me that, Actually, maybe I didn't even ask her. Maybe she brought it up. Yvonne is the best. I saw someone else shouting her out. Crystal was shouting her out and saying that her team helped her family. But I think Yvonne told me that if you are interested in moving to Mexico, the Mexican consulate will want to see that you have traveled to Mexico like recently, like at least in the last couple of years. It's not like, oh, I traveled to Mexico like as a child, and now I'm getting ready to retire and want to live there. They want to see a recent trip to Mexico. And she actually said that she's had some clients turned away at the consulate, and they were like, you need to go to Mexico and kind of do like a reconnaissance visit and then come back and apply for your residency. So those applicants were turned away from the consulate. They went to Mexico, they came back, and with that travel history, then the consulate was like, cool, you're good to go. And they got their visa. And now they have their residency. So it's not necessarily like a number of times, but I would say a recent trip in the last couple of years would be important. What do you think about hurricane season? Should you get travel insurance? I am very curious to see what this hurricane season will be like in Mexico this year, because I kind of feel like rainy season started really early here and like went really hard. A lot of people were saying that this was like a more intense rainy season than it has been in the past, but in the past couple of years, but it seems to be kind of letting up now. So hopefully end of October, mid-November, the rain will be done here for you. I think November is the best time to be traveling in Mexico. It's like a very underrated time to be traveling in Mexico because it's right before high season. It's after hurricane season. So you kind of get like that little window here. I've also taken trips in like near the end of October, mid-October. I went to the beach last year and it was good. Like it rained, but it only rained a little bit during the day. It was nothing overwhelming. So, but as far as travel insurance, I would definitely recommend that you get a travel insurance, Angela. I like Safety Wing. I've also used World Nomads. The best travel insurance for you will depend on your age and your needs. But I know Allianz has a travel insurance that people like as well. So yes, I would definitely recommend getting travel insurance for sure. Oh, another thing about this kind of time of year in Mexico, I don't know if anybody else has been dealing with this, but I have been in Mexico, if you've been dealing with this, but I have been having like allergies the past couple weeks and I can't really figure out why. It is very green here, but it's also like raining a lot. So I think like everything's getting, I would think, washed out of the air. I don't know. I have allergies a couple of times a year here in Guadalajara. In February, they're usually pretty bad for like a week or two. And then also in May, they're usually pretty bad. So definitely something to keep in mind if you are considering moving to Guadalajara. If you're considering moving anywhere in Mexico, especially the bigger cities, it's not just pollution. There's also a lot of construction going on, and that's, the different particulate dust in the air, that sort of stuff. Linda, you are considering moving to Puerto Vallarta. What are some of the important things that I need to do now? If you are considering moving to Mexico, I would say number one is to start researching consulates, to pick 3 consulates where you might apply, and research, the residency requirements. How easy is it to get a booking? Try emailing them, see if they answer you back about questions. I always tell people to email to confirm the requirements on the website because they are not always up to date, or sometimes there'll be like another secret thing that you need. As far as moving to Puerto Vallarta, I there's a couple in our Move to Mexico membership that has just moved to Puerto Vallarta. And I've got a foreigner interview from Maggie about what it's really like to live in Puerto Vallarta over there on Patreon. I would definitely say check those out because those are really great resources, stuff that I don't share on YouTube. Yeah. All right, I think that we have time for one more question. Remember, if you want to check out the Patreon, there is this QR code up here. Let's see. All right, from Fish Stick Lunch, what is the most bohemian non-coastal region that keeps the coastal vibe? What is the most bohemian non-coastal region that keeps the coastal vibe? This is interesting. I would say like, I don't know, maybe it's your name that is making me think of this, but pretty much anywhere in Mexico, like the bigger cities like Mexico City, like Guadalajara, you can find so many good mariscos restaurants, like seafood restaurants. I mean, you definitely don't need to be living on the coast to find really good seafood in Mexico. As far as like a coastal vibe, but that I don't know, I would maybe say like to check out places in Baja California. I know that's like kind of on the coast, but maybe some of the more inland places over there. I mean, nothing gets like super inland because it is a peninsula. But I love La Paz, which like I guess is on the water. But I mean, there's also a lot of desert over there too. I don't know. This is an interesting question. If anyone has anything else has any thoughts on that, yeah, feel free to share. All right, let's see. I will, I guess, round it out with this question here. Why did you choose Guadalajara over other cities in Mexico? I wanted to make sure that I included this question because, like I've said in the chat at the top of the live stream, I see that somebody mentioned Puerto Escondido, but that's also on the coast. It's like hard to find. I don't. That's like a tough question. All right. So why did you choose Guadalajara over other cities in Mexico? Like I said at the top of the call, this month or in October, we are celebrating 3 years of living here in Guadalajara. So I'm obviously feeling very, very nostalgic about that. Guadalajara is a city that we never, ever, ever had on our radar when we moved to Mexico. Actually, when Taylor and I were getting ready to move to Mexico from Spain back in 2017, the cities that we were considering were Queretaro, which is where we ultimately ended up, and the other one was Puebla, which like that would have been interesting. I do like Puebla. I think Puebla is a good city, especially Cholula, I think is really cool. The little town that's kind of like in the shadow of the pyramid there. But anyway, those are the two cities that we were considering, ultimately ended up in Querétaro, and I kind of thought that we would be there forever. And then it was a trip to Guadalajara that I just like opened our eyes and we're like, oh my gosh, it's time to shake things up. And we moved here. Some things that I love about Guadalajara, I love the restaurant scene here. There's so many amazing places to eat in Guadalajara. It's, people always ask me for my favorite restaurant and I send them like a list of like 20 places. Just so many good places to eat. A lot of like creative, interesting food here too. I love the Via Recreativa, which every Sunday from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. they close down some of like the biggest roads in the city, and it's no more cars. They close it down to cars, and it's just for bikers, runners, people on their skates, skateboarders. You see people out there pushing strollers, jogging with their dogs. It's amazing. I think that is just so cool. And I guess they're going to start doing like Via Nocturna, which is going to be at night. So I'm really excited to try that out. Also, just like I said, they're really friendly people here in Guadalajara. I don't know, Tapatios, Tapatias are very, very friendly people. So I'm just, thought I would just kind of round this out with saying that I really love Guadalajara, and I feel really, really grateful that we have gotten to call it home for the past 3 years, and looking forward to calling it home for longer. All right, everybody, we will leave it there. Thank you so much for coming. Again, if you want to check out the Patreon for exclusive content, it would be cool to connect with you at the Mixer on Wednesday. So that's this Wednesday, the monthly Mexico Mixer. It's my favorite time of the month. We always have a good time in there, answering people's questions in real time as they prepare for their moves to Mexico. And, people, all kinds of people in our community, people that have already moved to Mexico, people that are still dreaming of their move to Mexico, people that like have the countdown going on. So wherever you are in your plans there, you would be welcome in the Move to Mexico membership. So thank you again to Taylor. Thank you to everyone, each of you who has tuned in tonight, and we'll catch you at the next live stream. Bye-bye.